Genesis have had a huge career spanning over 6 decades, 15 albums, and multiple lineup changes. In that time, they've navigated through genre changes, critical praise, and backlash, and had more hit singles than you can count. So it's no surprise that their setlist has changed a lot throughout the years. But there's one song they ended up refusing to play: ABACAB. While lots of tracks have come and gone from the Genesis live set, this one hasn't been played since 1987. But why? Let's take a look at this abandoned track, and if you love classic rock stories like me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and join the pack. First, let's take a look at ABACAB. ABACAB was one of 4 singles released on the album of the same name, released in September 1981. After their 1980 tour of the UK and North America supporting the album Duke, Genesis took a short break before entering the studio to write and record their 11th album. When they entered the studio in 1981, the lineup consisted of Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks. The album was the first to be recorded in their own studio. The band had purchased Fisher Lane Farm in Surrey and remodeled it into a private rehearsing space and fully kitted out recording studio. Most of the songs were actually figured out in the farm's living room while the band waited for the studio to be ready, before spending 14 weeks of long 12 to 14 hour days hashing out the album. The new rehearsal space seemed to have a positive effect for the band as well. They reportedly had enough material for a double album, before cutting a lot of it as being too similar to past songs. ABACAB was also the first album Genesis recorded in England since A Trick of the Tail. Fun fact, the name ABACAB came about as the band were playing around with the song's structure. There are 3 bits of music in ABACAB, and we refer to them as Section A, Section B, and Section C. And at different times, they were in a different order. We'd start with Section A, and then have Section C, and then have Section... and at one point in time, it's spelt ABACAB. And you've got the final version where it's not like that at all. It's like well, you get the idea. The single and the album marked a change in approach for Genesis. While working as a trio, the band had started to drift from the prog rock roots, blending in more components of pop into their songwriting in an effort to reach a wider audience. Tony Banks said that they were mindful to avoid what he called Genesis cliches, such as lengthy instrumental passages, reprises, extended solos, that sort of thing. Some fans turn their noses up at this to this day, as often happens with any change in a band's sound, but it was still a very successful era. The single ABACAB was released in August 1981 to a mostly positive response despite the change in sound. Record World said that sinuous keyboards, pulsating synthesizers, and a driving rock beat transport Phil Collins' lead vocal. It peaked at number 9 in the UK pop charts and hit 26 in the US Billboard Hot 100, and was a regular in the set for the next 6 years, including their 81 ABACAB tour and tours in 83 and 86. The album itself did even better, hitting number 1 in the UK and number 7 in the US, with the title track being one of the standouts. So the song was certainly popular, and then it just disappeared. ABACAB hasn't been seen live since 1987, during the band's Invisible Touch tours. Back then they used to play around with how they would play the song. In the early years, Phil Collins would sing the chorus in a high falsetto, while Banks and Rutherford sang the lower harmonies. Later on, Collins would sing the chorus in a lower octave, while Rutherford sang the higher falsetto harmonies. It's hard to say whether the switch around was purely for entertainment value, with the band exploring their abilities, or if it became necessary. Maybe Collins was struggling with the song. For their part, the band haven't said much about it. The song almost made an appearance in their 2007 reunion tour. The band had been on hiatus since 2000, after a planned tour was cancelled due to poor ticket sales. They rehearsed the song, but ultimately chose not to play it. Collins said, "That happened with ABACAB, which I'm sure everyone expects us to do. Around the time of the tour, halfway through the first verse, I said, I don't really want to sing this. I don't know what it's about." In fairness, the lyrics are a bit strange. Look up on the wall, there on the floor, under the pillow, behind the door. There's a crack in the mirror. Somewhere there's a hole in a window pane. Do you think I'm to blame? Tell me, do you think I'm to blame? I'm not sure what that's about either, to be honest. Is there some sense of guilt about something in there, or is it just random rhyming words? I mean, let's face it wouldn't be the first time the band had sung nonsense to record a single. I think it shows some integrity from Phil Collins that he didn't want to sing a song he didn't believe in. We thought the 2007 tour would be the end, and this was never planned. So it was a nice thing to have happened. That shows something of the band's mentality around the song. If they chose not to sing it on what they thought was a last tour, obviously they were done with it. It's interesting that ABACAB was so completely cut out. Plenty of popular tracks have come and gone from their set list, and it's no surprise with such a massive catalogue to choose from. For example, some of their biggest hits to have been shelved from time to time include prog rock era classics like Supper's Ready, but also pop hits like In Too Deep and Misunderstanding. But the band haven't expressly said why they don't play them. And in fairness, there's nothing unusual about that. Long-running bands change their set lists all the time. For Genesis, having had two singers, different musical approaches, critical receptions, and health concerns, it makes perfect sense. It's also worth remembering that they're human beings, and people change. When they first played ABACAB, they would have been in their 30s. During the 2007 reunion tour, they'd have been pushing 60, and later in 2023, they'd all reached 70. That's a lot of time for taste to change, but ABACAB seems to be the only one that they, or specifically Phil Collins, is on record to refuse playing. It's just a bit odd. There might be a bit more of a clue if we take a deeper look behind the fans' opinions of the song. Looking past the sales success, there's actually a lot of disdain for ABACAB, both the single and the album. In online forums, many call it a disappointment, or even that they sold out, that classic accusation of any band that even slightly alters their sound. And this opinion mostly seems to come from the prog rock era Peter Gabriel loyalist fans. Most people that started listening to the band post-Gabriel seem to like it just fine. If you were the band hearing this kind of feedback, it's pretty understandable that you might not want to play the song. One incident would definitely have stuck in their mind. All the way back in 1981, when ABACAB was first released, Genesis had every band's worst nightmare. While performing in Leiden, the Netherlands, the band were near enough booed off the stage during songs from ABACAB. Eyewitness accounts claim that during songs like No Reply at All, Who Done It, and Man on the Corner, diehard fans wearing Genesis gear ripped into the band with boos. Reportedly, Collins eventually lost his temper, let's call it, and lashed out at the crowd, calling those booing a bunch of assholes, and encouraging members of the crowd to beat the shit out of them. Now, I took all of this with a pinch of salt until I came across this remarkable video on YouTube. It's actually a full-length bootleg audio of the concert, and you can clearly hear fans booing and jeering during and after ABACAB songs, as well as some very choice words that Phil Collins had for them.
Right, well, now that we've cheered everybody up, we're going to play another new song now. And anybody that doesn't like it can come and meet me afterwards and I'll kick the shit out of them.
Yeah, if I was that band during that show, I'd definitely second-guess things after that. Whether it made them angry or sad, having your work booed by your own fans is going to leave a mark. To their credit, the band soldiered on and kept playing those songs for another few years, so perhaps that had nothing to do with the song being dropped. But it would definitely make sense if it was a factor. Whether any of this comes into it, or if it was just as simple as Phil Collins losing touch with the song, I guess we'll never really know. Sadly, it seems that ABACAB and Genesis itself has been put to bed. Due to his sadly declining health, Collins had already firmly said that the 2021 The Last Domino tour would be his last, although there was some speculation to this given the question mark at the end. During that tour, Phil had to have his son fill in on drums, whilst he had to be seated for all of the shows. But despite fans hoping there might be more, Tony Banks confirmed in 2023 that the band was over, as Collins was tragically just too unwell to continue touring. Their final top 10 hit in both the UK and the US was I Can't Dance, and Phil Collins would accuse their fan base of not understanding the message behind that song. Luckily for you, I've made an entire video dissecting it. Click over here and watch that one next.